I'm assuming you made me go back to do panelists.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I really need 2 more screens.
What's up?
I need 2 more screens.
Oh,
I gotta go
yeah.
back and forth between so many documents. It's fine in the office,
Exactly.
but not so much here. I will confirm with Commissioner Williams. Are we ready? Commissioner Williams, would you like me to conduct this hearing?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Good to go, Commissioner Corn?
Yes,
Good
sir.
start.
Yep.
All right, it is June 20th, 2025 at 10:03 a.m. And we are reconvening this public hearing for conditional use permit 0012-24. And with that, just want to state, so we've already gone through the staff presentation, the applicant's presentation, all of the public comment, rebuttal, and we actually had just entered into deliberation by the board. So we are continuing from that part of the agenda. And before we continue with that and come to our conclusions, do we have anybody who needs any assistance, hearing assistance or otherwise for this hearing? Seeing none, we should be able to just pick up where we left off on the agenda then. And
Can we call for conflict of interest again at the start of this hearing?
sure.
Commissioner Williams has no conflict.
Commissioner Corn has no conflict.
Commissioner Domke has none.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Who would like to begin?
Commissioners,
I
this is
can-
Bill Wilson. Can you guys hear me?
We can,
Yes.
Bill.
So I think that my vision for the way that this deliberation will go is that we have the reason statement worksheet that you guys have in hand and that we've discussed at length. And so maybe, if Alex, I don't know, Alex, if you want to, or if the chair just wants to go down the list of those items and try to fill in those blanks. It's meant to be a guide, kind of a guide to use during this process. So if that's acceptable to the board, then I think that's how we do it.
I think that's reasonable, and then it'll allow each of us to give a comment on each item that's there.
I agree. It should be the most efficient that way, and that was what we discussed as our intent, if I recall, at the prior portion of the hearing. So yeah, if it looks like all three commissioners are in agreement. So if we want to begin with, and I apologize, I'm just trying to reformat my screen. The lack
And
of
Commissioner Domke, I anticipate that there will be some decision criteria that are not in dispute and others that are. So if there are items that have not been either identified by applicants or appellants as being in dispute, or if the board is willing to adopt the reasoning in the staff report as it addresses one particular criteria, it could just be as easy as saying, I accept the staff report analysis on this topic. And hopefully that can kind of let us get through the non-controversial components and then focus on the ones that matter.
I would still like to go from top to bottom of the sheet, and we can make that
Yes.
statement as we hit those items, please.
Yes, certainly. Commissioner Williams, that's exactly what I want you to do.
Okay, so
Yeah,
I'm
I
going
agree.
to start, if you guys are ready to start with the first one, Idaho Code 676512.
Please proceed.
So it's the requirement states that a special use permit, conditional use permit may be granted, and it to an applicant if the proposed use is conditionally permitted by the terms of the ordinance, subject to conditions pursuant to specific provisions of the ordinance, subject to the ability of political subdivisions to provide services for the proposed use, and when it is not in conflict with the plan. I found that the proposed use is in conflict with the comprehensive plan in the following categories: property rights, land use, natural resources, and community design. Do you want to, let me ask you this, Chair, do you want to go on to list the evidence section for, first it tells you to say yes or no, and then it lists your evidence. Do you want me to list the rationale for my conflict decision?
I think
We should do that in each case. So I think if each commissioner indicates if they believe it's a yes or no, and they provide the evidence, then we can hear each person's full thought, and then see if we feel it's necessary to deliberate further. Does that, everyone agree?
Yep.
Sounds good. All right, there's an obligation to consider the impacts on neighboring properties. We are to protect property rights, encourage increased values, minimize impacts to neighbors while maintaining the rural character. The proposal does not do the above. The proposed location of the tower would be visible from both inside the home of the neighboring property and in the yard of the neighboring property who testified in opposition of the application. In addition, it is clear that ITD has indicated that no permit would be given for the approach, which requires cooperation with the adjacent neighbor who is not in support of this item. And there are other options available to the carrier. So those were the reasons I gave that it was not in compliance.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Corn?
I would agree with everything Commissioner Williams said. Looking at my notes here. Yeah, that kind of covers everything I was thinking also.
I also agree, for the sake of as much detail as we can enter into the record, understanding that there may be redundancy. I'm just going to read what I've written in case there's anything that expands upon any of those ideas, but I do agree with those. reasons and ideas. So my answer to Idaho Code 67-6512 is also no. It's because of the fact that I believe it cannot provide services for the proposed use, and it is in conflict with the comprehensive plan. I believe that's because access from Highway 41, which is a necessary service for the proposed use, is not available. As has been submitted into the record, the Idaho Transportation Department provided a written comment on 1/22/2025 that a new approach to the subject property will not be granted, and that a new joint approach would only be considered if both property owners agree to move the current approach to the shared property line. The adjacent affected property owner to the north has indicated that they are not willing to move the approach. As such, no legal access exists to support the proposed CUP. The proposed CUP is in conflict with the comprehensive plan, since placing a 125-foot tall monopole cell tower in view of neighboring properties will neither preserve nor enhance the rural character of those rural, residential, and agricultural forestry designated parcels. Instead, the proposed CUP will negatively impact the rural character of those parcels by introducing a new item that is inconsistent and out of character with the existing rural context.
All right.
Is there anything about that description that anyone disagrees with?
I concur with that.
I don't see anything in there that I can disagree with.
So I think we've all agreed for the same variety of points, and we've just maybe described them slightly differently. So can we then say that this one is concluded on the worksheet and we move to the next item?
And we mark it as a no?
I would say that yes, we have conclusively agreed it's a no.
That's guys. Bill here. Excellent analysis. I just want to make sure, Alex. So in order for us to make sure that when we do the reason statement and capture all of this, are you going to be either taking notes, or are you going to be able to look back at this video to make sure that we're filling in all of that information on the reason statement worksheet?
I wrote mine down so I can email it to you guys.
All right.
Okay.
I just want to make sure
that's
we
what
don't
you were
have
asking
any.
us to do.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's fine too. I just want to make sure that we don't have any loss in translation between what the board says now, which is your reason statement, and then, because in the past we have had hiccups trying to translate that at the staff level when the decision letter comes out. So I just want to make sure we're doing a good job, but that we don't miss anything. That's all.
Yeah, I'll be doing both, Bill. I'm taking notes here now. I'll be listening back to the video after we're finished, and then I'll take the commissioner's worksheets and work that into the decision letter as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Alex will be locking himself into his office next week and
All right.
not coming up for air. All right, we're on to Bonner County Revised Code 12-222, application contents.
It seems to me that the application of content seems to be complete, as far as I could tell.
And I agree that it was complete in the sense that all of the required information was filled in. I did take exception because of the access issue. So the application indicating that the existing access encroachment from Highway 41 would provide access to the parcel for this CUP. But the record shows that their assertion of that is factually incorrect, since ITD is not going to allow that to occur without the permission of the adjacent property owner for the joint encroachment access. And so, since there is no viable option to provide access, then I do not believe that we can consider the application to be complete.
So I just want to make sure, on the application, I'm looking at page 6 of 17, where they've checked off all the boxes. I'm going down and I want to see where it says that they must have legal access for the application itself.
And actually, Mr. Wilson, if you could offer input, is from a legal technical perspective, is an application considered complete if it's known to the county that the content or the answers to questions on the application are factually incorrect?
Yeah, this is a good question, and I have spoken with staff about this. I don't think that you're being asked to weigh in on the whether or not each element that's been submitted there is factually true. It's just to see, did they submit the requisite information necessary to even move the project forward. Getting to the real, the heart of the issue for access can be addressed at that individual criteria analysis later in the worksheet, I think. But just for purposes of, was their application deemed complete by staff that had at least the facial amount of information necessary to process? That's all you're being asked right now. And I think the answer to that question is yes. I think Ron is on the right track there. You're not waiving your right to make the finding that the access is not sufficient. You can do that later. So I don't want to get bogged. You've noted that in your deliberation, and we can put that as part of the finding. But I would say, at least for purposes of completeness, the application was complete. It just may have information in it that you disagree with. Does that make sense?
Excuse me. It does, and that's what. Yes, thank you. So,
I took the position actually that Brian did, because I deemed the need to have the access information, and part of the reason I kind of think it's reasonable to put that in is because the applicant actually told us that they had requested a permit from ITD, and so to me that was recognition that that was part of the application itself, to show that that was not a hindrance of it. So I also put the lack of the ITD permit, but I can concede to Bill saying, are you just asking, did they fill out the form completely? To me, I think it's reasonable for us to look at the content of what was given in the application. But I could go either way, because we can address the ITD approach on the next box. But
that's what I think is right.
Box.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's better, because we're going to go down and discuss each element of the criteria decision making anyway. So you will definitely not waive your right to weigh in on the access issue. And we may even, for future. Well, that's good enough. I think that as long we've noted this, I think you can. I would recommend stating it as complete, but we'll also note in the reason statement that doesn't waive any objections to any of the criteria that you have yet to rule on.
Okay.
And that's kind of how I'm looking at it.
Sure.
Was the application complete?
yeah.
I believe it was.
And I agree that they filled it out completely. I did want to make sure that we preserve, if we discover in an application, and I'm saying any application or even a future application, if we discover in an application that information provided by the applicant is factually incorrect, whether it was intentional or through ignorance, I just want to be sure that the county isn't losing its rights to address that
And
issue.
I agree with you on that,
yeah,
but I do
but
agree that would be addressed
Yep.
later, further into this process.
And that-
right
yeah,
now, it's
so
a simple
Bill- question
as far as because if the application was not complete, if they failed to fill out a section, then this is where we would mark a no, and the application was not complete.
Can we just say that based on legal states that filling out the application constitutes a complete application? Because that's essentially what Bill is arguing, and that would preserve what our opinion is on the ITD approach, because I actually lean on wanting to look at applications for their completeness based on the factual information provided. So I see it both ways, but I could rest on saying legal states filling out the form constitutes a complete application, and that's the answer.
Yeah, and that staff, at the time the application was submitted, confirmed that all the questions had been answered.
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, so I think we can have, now there's the question of substantive answers or not, but in this case, it was a substantive answer. It's just not technically correct based on all the information we have in the record up to this point.
I don't see anywhere in 12-222 where they talk about ingress, egress, legal easements and that. So, and that's what this question is asking and
Yep.
is specifically referring to as 12-222. So I do think that it was filled out.
Okay, I will concur.
All right.
Commissioner Williams, you're still in agreement that we will
Yes.
answer that yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. We will move on then to the next one, 12-263, reconsideration.
I think that's the same.
I
It's
agree.
it's the evidence for the other question, for the thing we did above.
Yeah, since the reconsideration request was timely and considered complete per the staff presentation, I will accept that.
Yes, there is no reason to say no on this specific one. They followed the code and everything, and they're entitled to that, so I would have to mark that as a yes.
Agreed. I think we're all in agreement then.
Okay.
And obviously, I know you will, but if I ever say that I think we're all in agreement on something and it's not correct, please shout really loudly. Okay. So now we're on to
223.
12-223. Conditional use permits, standards for review of applications, procedures.
So what I put on 12-223 was that in order to grant the conditional use permit, we must find that the proposal is not in conflict with the policies of the comprehensive plan as found in the adopted implementation component, and that the proposed use will neither create a hazard nor be dangerous to persons on the adjacent properties. I found that it is in conflict with the comprehensive plan implementation. Property rights, we must consider the neighbor's property rights to include value. It is reasonable that a visual of the tower from the inside of her home will impact value. Land use, the tower does not support the rural character of the area. I use natural resources because the height of the tower within that airspace also serves to impact the view of the rural character. I indicated that the community design is diminished with the tower and negatively impacts the rural character. In the comprehensive plan in this particular zone, we are actually obligated to not just encourage, but to enhance that particular those characteristics of the area. And so when I'm balancing those particular topics in our comprehensive plan, not addressing the fact that there's an approach issue just in terms of whether it's in line with the surrounding area. I find that it's not in line with the comprehensive plan. The owner of the land who is requesting the conditional use permit maintains all of the rights associated with the current zoning, but allowing that tower diminishes the property right of the adjacent owner. And I also note here that during the hearing, the attorney for the appellant actually provided the argument for why this does diminish by clearly stating that nuisance was defined as a diminished ability to enjoy the property, which the adjacent property owner provided in showing not just that she would visually be able to see that tower, and he actually confirms that in our hearing on more than one occasion, and I believe I stated that repeatedly, that I agreed with that comment about nuisance and that I accept that that's accurate. I didn't accept the argument that about data and showing reduction. There is nobody that looks for a cell tower to live by that close. I know that there, and I think that it's reasonable to think that there would be a reduction of value on someone's property, and it's not always going to be realized because people can just see that tower and decide they don't even want to look at the home. And so for those reasons, I did not feel that it was in line with our comprehensive plan when you specifically go through the policies.
I'd agree with what Commissioner Williams said. And the last sentence also says that the use will neither create a hazard nor be dangerous to persons on or adjacent to the property. I don't know if I can say that I've recognized a hazard or danger, but I honestly can't say that I have not either. So I'm split on that. I don't have enough expertise to recognize a danger or a hazard with this cup in this location.
And I agree that I can't say that it won't be. I know that we're limited in our legal capability because of the 1996 Telecommunications Act and how it amended federal code to cite a health and safety concern associated with radio frequencies outside of what they specifically indicate. But I agree, I cannot say that there won't be.
It won't.
I also agree with Commissioner Williams that it's a no for me because we must find that the proposal is not in conflict with the policies of the comprehensive plan. But I have a slightly different perspective about that one, Commissioner, because it also indicates that we have to specifically find that it's not in conflict with the policies. And so I think some of the rationale you offered is associated with the goals and objectives portion, which is important, but it's not what we're supposed to point to. I can point to, when I look at the property rights, policy 3, it says the property rights of the applicant, adjoining and nearby landowners in future generations should be considered, as well as the short-term and long-term consequences of decisions. And I know that you were referencing that as well. For me, the record shows that the installation of the proposed cell tower, communications tower, would create a change in the visible rural character of the area as demonstrated by the photo simulations provided by the applicant. Such a change in the rural character was noted in the testimony of the affected landowner to the north, who indicated that the proposed change would negatively impact the enjoyment of her property. It was also noted in the record that the study by Afuso, Capello, and Camangini, 2018, published in the Journal of Real Estate, Finance, and Economics, used a hedonic pricing model to assess the spatial effects of cellular infrastructure on residential property values, finding that homes within close proximity, in this case slightly under a half mile, to such structures experienced a measurable decline in value. The record also includes testimony from an area real estate agent that indicated buyers often avoid properties in close proximity to or in sight of communications towers. So I think we've used similar and slightly different reasons, but I think we've all come to the same conclusion.
Okay.
Commissioner Donkey, one thing here, as we go through the reason analysis, it's not enough to just cite the evidence for the. You should also, if you can, try to address any contradictory evidence in the record and why you believe that the evidence you rely on is more probative than, say, a different study that was presented by the applicants. That will kind of reinforce the decision and probably make it more defensible.
I think that's a great point, Mr. Wilson. Thank you. And in this particular case, it is in the record that there was some back and forth debate between both the applicant and the appellant's attorney, that different studies were cited, and some of those studies were contradicting. Some of those studies were outside of the United States, and I agree that those should not be considered applicable. A few of the studies, both by the applicant and the appellant, were within the United States. And the reason that this one to me is noteworthy and worthy of consideration for a decision is because this particular study used a different methodology, and I found that to be more considerable and applicable based on the information that was provided. And so because of the difference in methodology that was used for their conclusions, that's the reason why I believe that this study was worthy of consideration as compared to the others. And it was also supported by the testimony of an area real estate agent as far as the conclusions, essentially. So I believe we're all in agreement that this is a no, that it does not support the policies of the comprehensive plan.
I'd vote no on it.
We're good. I agree that we're all in line.
Okay.
For sure, I would say that it's, that it is in conflict with the policies rather than it does not support the policies. So that's what this is stating.
Correct. The proposal is in
I'm
conflict.
sorry, I did not hear what that person said.
Mr. Fayan was asking us to essentially use the same language as the code section. So to clarify, we must find that the proposal is not in conflict with the policies of the comprehensive plan. We have found that the proposal is in conflict with the policies of the comprehensive plan.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So with that, we are on to County Code 12-335, public use table.
So on this one, I would like to read into the record number 3 and number 7. Number 3 states where access to the site is by road, the road shall be located within a recorded easement or public right-of-way and constructed to the appropriate standards set forth in Title II of this code or Appendix A of this title, except where subject to the terms of an approval special use permit issued by a state or federal agency. And number 7 cites a traffic plan is required describing at minimum the method of ingress and egress to the site, traffic circulation within the site, and on-premises parking and loading and launching areas. According to the email that we received from ITD, ITD will not grant additional approach permits to that property. And it also states that they would consider a new joint approach should both property owners wish to move the curved approach. The adjacent property owner stated in the hearing that they were not willing to do so. Therefore, they would not have ingress and egress for this proposed site.
Commissioners, if I may,
And
I apologize.
I'm sorry, just a minute, please.
Go ahead.
And so, thank you for reading that. And I just want to clarify that note 3 is the only applicable note
That's all I was
to that
getting at.
particular.
Yep.
But you did read note 3, so but we
I
we
did
have to
read-
disregard the other note
disregard
because
cited.
it's, when we look at the use table, note 3 is the only one that's applicable.
Now, we don't, Bill, do we have to follow this exactly, or is there a problem adding 7 to this?
It's
I actually don't think there should,
Consideration.
3 is
because
the
of
only
that.
one, so per code, note 3 is the only applicable note.
Right. Alex, do you want to, I don't have the,
so
that.
I concur
Go for
with,
it.
I concur with only using note 3, and I think we're all in agreement regarding the ITD declination of availability of a new permit.
Yeah, I agree with the rationale that you gave, I consider to be all in line with note 3. It's just for the note to be applicable, it must show up in the table.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah. So Ron, the way we read those tables is, if the number's in parentheses next to that or in that square in the table, then we go down and apply that note, but we don't apply them all unless it is linked up that way. So if note 7 is not identified as an applicable standard, then we wouldn't apply it here.
Understood.
But I agree with Commissioner Corn's rationale, and I'd like to just also state, if I missed it, I apologize. But the applicant themselves or their representatives stated in the record that they do not in fact have an easement to access the property. So from their own statement, they indicated they do not have legal access based on an easement.
Okay, I think we're all in agreement on that one.
Yep, I think we're good on 335. So now we're on to 12-4.20, general standards.
On what I put on 12.4.21 performance standards was the language of that says no
Commissioner?
land or build.
I'm sorry, we're on 12-420, general standards.
Oh, yeah, page break, sorry.
And if
problem.
I could, Commissioner, sorry, I always interrupt in your deliberations, but if we could go back to 12-335, and if you guys could make a finding that whether or not communication towers are conditionally permitted in the zone, that's also a finding that you'll have to make. And whether or not it meets the note it can also be a part of that finding. But that will be probably something that gets brought up if the board doesn't make the finding that that they can even have standing to ask for the conditional use permit. That's something that would need to be in the findings as well.
I am comfortable stating that communications towers, per Bonner County Revised Code 12-335 Public Use Table, are conditionally permitted in the zone with the requirement of Note 3. Commissioner Corn agrees?
I agree.
Commissioner Williams, are you in agreement?
Oh, sorry, yes.
Okay.
That's all I need.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fan. Good catch. I'm sure there will be, and we will appreciate your input. Okay, so now we're on to 12-420, general standards.
So on that one, I went down to D because that was where the access to the access comes into play as an issue.
I agree.
Commissioner Williams, and to the whole board, I know we want to jump to the items upon which we want to have the debate, but can we either, there are going to be certain criteria that were not objectionable, right? Certain kind of benign things. I would like to have something in the record showing that the other design criteria were approved, but we're going to focus on this other thing. So to the extent that there's other components that you don't object to, could you just include something to state, either we accept staff analysis on these issues, or we recognize that these issues have been met by the application, and then reserve the right to identify the ones you disagree with. But I also would like to see something from you guys, either referencing back to the staff report or just acknowledging that other less contentious criteria have actually been satisfied.
So I did that at the end. The reason I didn't do that in these sections is the question that gets asked on this form that you gave was the information for the conclusion that you came to. And so what I did was I looked at the standard itself and identified where it fell below for why that would be an issue. And so at the end, I put through accepting the other areas, barring the areas that I dissented an opinion from, because that was how this was drafted, was to give the supporting information for the conclusion.
Understood. Yeah, as long as there's just something in the record to identify the fact that, unless otherwise stated, then, for those portions that don't merit objection, then those can be incorporate the staff report analysis. But then on the issues the deciding issues, that's where we spend our time. That's all I'm trying to get into the record. Thank you.
Okay. And so after we go through this, we can make a blanket statement that addresses this. This is the conclusion we came up with, but barring the elements of the staff report, because there are some where there's not a conflict, that we are in line with what the staff report said. I just didn't do that on each because I'm justifying a conclusion.
That's fine. That accomplishes the same goal.
Okay. So on 12.420, I found that there was not compliance with subsection D.
I concur.
Due to the deeded access, the ingress and egress, is that correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, as previously described in this deliberation.
Yep, I would agree with that. As far as all the other subsections of 12-420, I don't see any conflict.
I agree. So I think we can then move on. One moment, please. I'm updating my notes. So now we're on to 12-421, performance standards for all uses. And I can lead us off if you'd like. For me, it's a yes. Per the staff report, the proposed CUP is unlikely to result in fire hazards, electrical disturbance, noise, vibration, air pollution, or water pollution. The conflicting evidence of the effect of communication towers regarding radioactivity or electrical disturbance is not conclusive, in my opinion, and is not allowed to be used as a determining factor per the 1996 Telecommunications Act and the resulting amendments to federal code.
I think I got hung up on something, and I could go either way on this, but when I look at performance standards, it adds another element that I couldn't reconcile. It says that it adds and objectionable conditions in there, and that is very vague and open to interpretation. And so it allows for the adjacent property to say the placement and location are objectionable. And how much does that weigh into the other verbiage in that subsection? And so I wasn't sure on that particular aspect of it. Does that count enough to say it's not in compliance? But I could see going either way, but it was the objectionable condition is what I kind of maybe that counts as making a substandard, but with the rest of what's in that 12421, I think it is in compliance with.
I see your perspective there, Commissioner, and I had read that as well. But I think what we need to do is go to the very end of that sentence where it says, as established by the following performance requirements. So I think that's the linchpin that we have to focus. We can't consider something outside of the following performance requirements that are listed. I think we're bound to only that list, is the way the language reads to me.
So for myself, I'm looking at 12421 and I'm looking at the staff report. The staff report says the requested use is unlikely to result in fire hazards or electrical disturbance, noise, vibration, air pollution, or water pollution. However, this is conflicting evidence, and I think that should be there, is conflicting evidence in the record regarding the effect of communication towers in regards to radioactivity. So unlikely, I'm not sure if I want to hinge my vote on an unlikely to result, because that means that it could or may, or and then reading on the radioactivity, which is section B, it says radioactivity or electrical disturbance. No activity shall emit harmful radioactivity at any point or electrical disturbance adversely affecting the operation of any equipment at any point other than that of the creator of such disturbance. I have a problem myself with B because I'm not sure that this specific CUP would not emit the radioactivity or electrical disturbances. And then I also have a question for you two on E of that section. E states air pollution. Any use must be operated and maintained in conformance with the minimum air pollution control standards and regulations established by the health authority. Do we have a report from them showing that this would not create any air pollution by the control standards and regulations established by the health authority? Because I'm not quite clear myself on what exactly air pollution, what is the definition of air pollution? What is that?
So go ahead, Commissioner.
But I think on your comments, and I think we're all at a disadvantage because as more cell towers go in, the studies about the what it emits and the impacts are coming out from different areas. But I think because of the federal guideline, we're not allowed to consider that when we're addressing this component. And in terms of the air pollution, I interpret that to be that if the type of air pollution that you could pull into that category would be the emissions that come from the cell tower. And I think the federal code essentially gives a pass to cell towers on subsection E. My issue, I kind of maintain when I look at the measurement procedures that objectionable elements is open to an interpretation, but overall, if we can't identify a health and safety issue because of the federal guidelines associated with cell towers, I think that I have to either say that, okay, it's okay with respect to this particular one, or and what I wrote was that it does have objectionable elements to the cell tower due to the proximity to its adjacent neighbor.
Yeah, and that's where just the way I read that long sentence, I think we're forced to focus only on A through I. I don't think we're allowed to just interpret or create criteria that are considered to be dangerous, injurious, noxious, or otherwise objectionable conditions outside of that list with the way I read that sentence.
So let's take
Commissioners,
a assess.
Sorry, Asia. I do think that Commissioner Donkey has the best reading here. That the objectionable term does relate to the criteria that follow, and then also, but Commissioner Williams is also right in the sense that responding to Commissioner Korn, my best reading of the federal authority is that we're precluded from, well, what's the best way to put it? Considering the emissions from the tower as some kind of pollutant or contaminant, so that when we use the term air pollution or language to that effect, that it's talking about particulate matter and not about any emissions that the tower might send. That's just something that the federal law imposes on us.
Okay, so just to be clear, Bill, the 1996 Communications Act does prevent us from taking into the science and the facts of RF radiation and physical burns and hazards to persons, property, animals. It's all revolves around that 1996.
I think that's right.
Communications Act.
We are basically limited by if the tower, if the restriction on the emissions from the tower comply with FCC regulation or federal regulation. I think that's presumptively then, as far as environmental concerns go, we don't have the right to go make a requirement that is more stringent than that. So assuming that the tower would comply with federal emissions regulations, I don't think that we have the ability to deny it on this basis, which I think is what Commissioners Domke and Williams have already articulated.
And to clarify, Bill, I think it's great that we're all really talking through this because it's obviously something that each of the commissioners I've heard express concerns over. We have numerous public comment in the record indicating concerns over those issues, but we are simply legally limited with the ability to consider that in a decision. Since you didn't say no, I'm going to take that as a yes.
I agree.
Okay. So then, in that case, are we going to say that yes, 12-421 performance standards for all uses, that we are agreeing with the conclusions of staff and the staff report, with the exception that the conflicting evidence with regard to the effective communication towers regarding radioactivity or electrical disturbance is not conclusive, but it's not allowed to be used as a determining factor for the 1996 Telecommunications Act and the resulting amendments to federal code.
I'd agree.
Commissioner Williams, are you still in agreement? Maybe I shouldn't say still. Are you in agreement? Commissioner, if you're speaking, we can't hear you at this point. Commissioner Williams, we are still not able to hear you. I think she's going to reconnect. She just dropped off. We'll wait a moment. Oh, good point.
You know, Brian, if she's unable to call back in.
Hello?
Okay, good.
I'm online. It's just something keeps muting me.
Is she showing up as a panelist?
I just added her as one.
Can you hear me now?
We
Yes,
can,
we can.
Commissioner. We're trying to correct the system issue on our end. What we believe to be an issue on our end.
Something happened because I could see you guys moving still, but I couldn't, you couldn't hear me. But I'm back.
We can hear you now, Commissioner.
You want to ask if she is in favor of?
Yeah, Commissioner, we were bringing to a close the 12-421 performance standards. Wanted to confirm that you were in agreement to say that it's a yes, with we cited the exception to our inability to address issues per the 1996 Telecommunications Act.
I agree.
Okay, thank you. Then in that case, we can move on to County Code 12-4.3 parking standards.
I think they have shown that they have met the requirements of 12-4.3.
I agree.
Agreed, and I would accept the conclusions of the staff report for this item. Then we're on to 12-4.4 sign standards.
And again, I think it looks like they have shown that they have met the standards of 12-4.4, stating that they will not violate any of the sign standards of our code.
I agree.
I agree as well. Moving on to 12-4.5 design standards.
I cited 12450A, to preserve and enhance the rural character and natural resource amenities of the county, and to preserve dark skies by reducing nighttime glare and light pollution, are not met with this proposal.
I did also.
Commissioner Williams, could you please expand on the rationale for the dark skies, night pollution?
If I recall on these towers that there's usually a light at the top that flashes, that's what I use.
The anti-collision light?
Yeah,
Thank you. I agree that I don't believe it's in conformance with the standard to preserve and enhance the rural character and natural resource amenities of the county.
To preserve and enhance. I think those are key words.
Agreed.
agreed.
Okay, then we're ready to move on to 12-4.6, landscaping and screening standards.
I believe that they have met the requirements of our revised code 12-263 on their landscape designs that they have presented.
I agree.
I agree as well. And are we comfortable with accepting the staff conclusions in the staff report?
I am.
I am.
I'm in agreement.
Commissioners, can I clarify that it was 12-4.6? I believe Commissioner Corn said 263. I wanted to make sure that we were.
I went to the wrong page, didn't I? Yes, 12-4.6.
Agreed. Thank you for the clarification.
Glad someone's paying attention.
We have just a few sections. We're on to 12-488A, communication towers. A is specific to the enclosure of the facility by a fence not less than 6 feet in height.
And they did say that they were going to install that, showed it on their plans, so I see no conflict with that.
I agree.
I agree. Once again, are we acceptable to relying on the conclusions of staff in the staff report?
Yes.
I am.
I am as well. We're on to 12-488B. The base of any tower shall not be closer to any property line than a distance equal to the tower height.
I accepted staff's report on that item.
I did as well.
As do I. We are on to 12-488C. Sorry, did you want to? I was just going to read it unless you want me to.
No, would you like to read it?
The zoning commission shall consider the public convenience and necessity of the communication tower and any adverse effect the facility would have upon properties in the vicinity. It may require such reasonable restrictions and conditions of development as to uphold the purpose and intent of this title and the comprehensive plan.
So I found C being in conflict. I did not see a proven necessity of the communication tower, and I do believe that it was shown that the property values most likely will go down in areas where they're adjacent to these cell towers. So I'm a no on C.
On that one, I was also found that there was a no. I didn't find that they identified a necessity. I made comment that there wasn't a clear presentation from the applicant regarding why co-location wouldn't fill whatever gap that they perceived. I also noted I didn't feel clear and convincing evidence showed that there was a need. And then I noted that in that hearing, identification of another location that wouldn't impact neighbors was available to use. So the necessity of this particular site was not convincing to me per 488C. And when taking into consideration the impact to an adjacent property, I didn't accept the opinion that people want to live next to a cell phone tower, as I felt that it's a reasonable assumption that there will be limitations on who would want to buy a property within a tower that closely, and that it's, in as much as the applicant wanted to say that evidence wasn't given showing that their property will decrease, I think it's not just reasonable, but they didn't bring any evidence that showed that the placement of that tower and the location would not cause the property value of the adjacent property owner to decrease. And I think that it's incumbent upon them, since they're the applicant, to show that there won't be an adverse effect when you're considering the adjacent property. And I think they failed to do that.
I did as well. I think there's two different types of people when it comes to cell service and cell towers. It was presented to us in the hearing that most people like living close to cell towers and such, but those studies that I saw were in urban settings where people enjoy those kinds of things. I didn't see anything that was presented to us as a board as far as rural residents. And you have two different types of people. The rural type residents do not enjoy having that stuff in their backyards. They would not pay extra to buy a piece of property that is located next to a cell tower because it has cell service. And especially today with all the other modern conveniences that we have with such things like Starlink and everything else, that would provide even a greater service that the rural people can enjoy and have. For me, it's a no on that.
I agree with both commissioners, and I'd also like to state that I believe there's no reasonable restrictions and conditions that can mitigate the adverse effects identified in the record and during our deliberations. I just don't see how we can mitigate it. I don't think we can place a condition that would take away the impacts that we're describing.
Right. And don't get me wrong, I'm not opposed to cell towers, but this is just not
Yes,
the right
and
place.
there's, it says to consider the public convenience and necessity. There's absolutely a convenience that's provided with increased coverage, and even a public safety perspective of 911 access. I agree that those things are valuable, but I also agree and believe it's important that we find the right location, as has been discussed, the least impactful location, in order to help still provide a benefit, and also being able to provide mitigations. And I just don't see where we can provide mitigations to those concerns. And the fact that they themselves, the data presented by the applicant, indicated that the site that they're proposing is not the absolute best location to improve coverage. It's an acceptable location based on their criteria, but it's not the best. It's not the most effective. So they've already demonstrated through their own admission that they're willing to accept something other than the absolute best location. So then I believe it behooves us and them to find a place that mitigates the issues to the greatest extent possible and practical. And I don't believe they've demonstrated that they've done that.
I'd agree.
I agree.
So I think we're all in agreement then, and we can move to 12-488D.
So to be clear, that it's a no for
It's a no.
12488C.
Agreed. So D has to do with building to the industry standards.
I believe that they have demonstrated that they will plan on building that to industry standards. So I see that one as a yes.
I agree.
I also agree. Are we acceptable to the conclusions of the staff report?
I accept it.
I accept that.
As do I. On to E.
I believe they also demonstrated that they would build the tower to accommodate other future communication services where technically feasible. So for that, it would be a yes for me.
I agree.
I also agree. Are we accepting of the staff report conclusions?
I am.
I am.
As am I. 12-48F.
On F, I also think that they presented that they would comply with the operational construction and lighting standards of the Federal Aviation Administration. So to me, that would be a yes.
I agreed.
I also agree. And will we accept the staff conclusions in the staff report?
I do.
Yes.
I do as well. On to 12-48G.
I think they have also presented that they would conform to not penetrating any airspace surface on or adjacent to any public or private airfields as set forth as subchapter 5.2 of this title. So for me, that's a yes.
I agree.
I also agree, and I want to state that they updated the record in their presentation by obtaining the FAA no hazards letter. On to 12-488H.
On this one, I have a question for the board. I'm not sure if I missed it, but did they say that they would have a bond for deconstruction of this cell tower if it was built and then abandoned for over a year?
I don't recall them stating that. I think we'd have to go back to the application itself. Mr. Fain, are you aware?
I did not see that in the record, Commissioner.
Because my concern is, obviously, if you build something, you're making money off of it, and then for some reason, maybe cell service goes away and there's some new fang-dangled way of communicating with each other. Where's the incentive for them to spend $500,000 to come in and deconstruct that and put it back the way it was, according to our code?
So there was nothing in the application that provided, or nor did the applicant state that they would provide a bond. I believe it was maybe a public comment from the previous, or from the first portion of the hearing on Tuesday that suggested requiring a bond, but that isn't something that's required by code, nor was it offered by the applicant.
So if it's not required by code, then we can't require that.
Technically, we can make it a condition, but it can only be a condition if we were to approve it.
Okay.
My understanding is, if it were to be approved, it could be a condition. And actually, I don't recall what the staff report said on this one.
But on H, because it says that the decommissioning of it would be required, I think all we have to answer is that they didn't mention that in their application that they would do that.
The staff report says that per the applicant, that they understands and will comply with this provision. I just don't know what documentation that comes from. If that's through some other communication between the applicant and staff. that I just don't recall.
So the statement in the staff report for H was a response from the applicant when they provided the application to us. And the staff analysis was to make this a condition of approval if it were to be approved. But I believe that that this is what the applicant provided us before any analysis on the staff report.
So would it be fair for us to mark this as a yes with a note that if we do approve this, that we would add that as a condition?
I think that would be appropriate. Commissioner Williams, are you in agreement?
Yes.
Okay, next we have 12-488I, flammable material storage.
I think that they presented enough evidence to the board stating that they're complying with 12-488I, so that would be a yes for me.
I agree.
I also agree. And once again, will we accept the conclusions of the staff report?
I do.
I do.
I do as well. 12-488J, signage, symbols, flags, banners, and other or objects attached or painted, so on and so forth.
On this one also, I do believe that they complied with 12-488J and understand that our code does not allow any flags, banners, or other devices or objects attached to the tower. So that'd be a yes for me.
I agree.
I also agree. Are we in agreement with accepting the conclusions of the staff report?
Yes.
Yes.
I agree. And last, I believe, on our worksheet, Bonner County Revised Code 12-7.2, grading, stormwater management, and erosion control.
And I do believe that they presented evidence to us that they were complying with the grading, stormwater management, erosion control, and 12-7.2, so that'd be a yes for me,
I agreed, and I'll accept the staff report.
as I will.
I'm also in agreement. At this time, we have concluded the worksheet. And I would ask if there's any further deliberation or if a commissioner would like to make a motion.
So I just have one thing to say off the top of my head that I did pick up in the hearing Wednesday, I believe. The applicant, the property owner, did make a statement about how property owners should have the right to follow through on commercial endeavors, and this was an easy one for him to make $1,000 a month for doing that. And so in the future, I think we need to look at this code because even as the applicant stated, it's a commercial endeavor, not a public use endeavor. It has nothing to do really with this specific case, but as per the property owner's own statement, he did state that this was a commercial use.
And I think there is a perception and definition issue here. So my understanding is per state statute and the definitions within state statute, telecommunications facilities are technically considered a public utility. But it's odd because there's an exchange of money, right? There are fees
Absolutely.
charged and paid to participate in the use of this. And so practically speaking, I agree that it functions like a commercial use, but by state definition, it's a public utility. So I think we have challenges, to look at and overcome. And I do want to make sure we remember, and I think Commissioner Williams has in her notes you might want to read, but to make an overall statement about our conclusions of this worksheet, that unless otherwise stated, all design standards are considered to be in compliance per the accepted conclusions of the staff report.
I agree, and I think that what our objective was to review how we came to the decision of that in terms of how we were going to vote. And for those areas that we didn't touch on, I am accepting the position taken in the staff report. So for me, I feel like we've thoroughly reviewed each element regarding this conditional use permit. I do understand Commissioner Corn's comment about the applicant, but I want to note too that we can't use the idea of his comment in terms of the file. And I want to specifically state that on record because that's one of the things that they commented on in their appeal letter was that this is not a commercial purpose. And that's just being specific to the rules and how they're written. But I'm ready to participate with the motion on this particular file.
Okay, we're prepared to hear a motion.
Should we, before we make a motion, should we just skim over everything that we've just decided on and agreed on?
I think that could be
that's
great.
proper?
I think that could be a great idea. We just went through a large number of items.
We did.
So I think review would probably be very wise. Thank you. Would you like me to read through what I have for my notes?
Sure. We're starting at the top?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Idaho Code 67-6512. That was, and actually, we were unanimous, as I recall, and have noted on all of these worksheet decisions. So for Idaho Code, that was a no, and it had to do with the proposed use being found to be in conflict with the comprehensive plan. And then the rest of these are Bonner County Code. So 12-222, application contents was a yes. 12-263, reconsideration, that was a yes. 12-223, the standards of review for the conditional use permit, that was a no, and it had to do with the consideration of the adjoining and nearby landowners and future generations, as well as the short and long-term consequences of the decision. 12-335, the public use table, was a no because of note 3, and it had to do with the lack of easement access to the property. 12-4.20, general standards, was a no because of section D, and that also went back to the lack of easement access. 12
Which one was that?
I'm sorry, that was 12-4.2 or 4.20,
4.2.
general standards.
Yes, thank you.
I think it splits between two pages,
It
which makes
does.
it a little more
It does.
difficult to follow. And that was a no under section D because of lack of access easement. 12-421, performance standards for all uses, was a yes. And we had the special note that there was some concern raised about safety issues that were raised in the record in our deliberation. However, that is not being taken into consideration with our decision because of the 1996 Telecommunications Act and the resulting amendments to federal code. 12-4.3, parking standards, was a yes. 12-4.4, sign standards, was a yes. 12-4.5, design standards, was a no. 12-4.6, landscaping and screening standards, was a yes. 12-488, communication towers, these are different standards. 488A was a yes. 488B was a yes. 488C was a no. 488D was a yes. 488E was a yes. 488F was a yes. 488G was a yes. 488H was a yes. 488I was a yes. 488J was a yes. And finally, 12-7.2 was a yes.
Okay, so just to back up real quick on 488H, was a yes with the condition of if we did go ahead and approve this, that we would require a bond, to be clear.
I'm sorry, you're correct. I did not note that. Yes, agreed. That's what my notes indicate as well. I kind of went rapid fire there at the end.
Flip the switch.
Commissioner Williams, did you hear anything that was inconsistent with your understanding or opinion?
I did not, and I think the overall, for my opinion, is that it's not in line with the overall comprehensive plan.
I agree, and if we look at our conclusions with the decision-making worksheet, and we look at authority levels, by starting at Idaho code, the fact that we're a no in Idaho code, and then we're a no at the upper levels of meeting the review standards for the conditional use permit. As we move below that, we're starting to get into granularity of details, and that's all important. But as we look at the higher levels of the decision making and the authority of the different relevant codes, and laws, we had no's on those highest level considerations, right? Statute and code. So from a hierarchy perspective, the no's were at the highest levels and the yeses were at the lower levels of consideration.
I would agree, and I'd also like to state that it's not really like, well, the majority of them was no's or the majority was yeses. That's not the point, because most of the yeses were simply, was the application complete? Are they going to build a fence around it? So when it comes to our actual codes and state statutes, I do think that is more of a priority of what we should be basing our opinion on. So I agree with your statement.
I agree with your conclusion on that.
I agree.
Commissioner Korn, did you want to make a motion?
Are you prepared to make a motion, Chair?
I can step down if needed. If Commissioner Williams is prepared, then we can. I'm fine.
I just, sometimes it's hard to do that over the
Right.
over the Zoom.
If it'll be more clear in the record from an audio perspective, I'm happy to step down and make the motion since I have one before me.
Can you do that? Because I don't want it to be unclear.
I think it's a good point.
All right, thank you.
Okay, stepping down from the chair. I move to uphold the board's previous decision and deny this project, file CUP 0012-24, a conditional use permit for a communications tower based upon the following conclusions. Conclusion 1, the proposed conditional use permit is in conflict with the policies of the Bonner County Comprehensive Plan. Conclusion 2, this proposal was reviewed for compliance with the criteria and standards set forth at BCRC Title 12, Chapter 2, Subchapter 2.2, Conditional Use Permits, Chapter 4, Development Standards, and Chapter 7, Environmental Standards. This proposal is not in accord with the Bonner County Revised Code. Conclusion 3, the proposed use will not create a hazard or will not be dangerous to persons on or adjacent to the property. The decision is based upon the evidence submitted up to the time of the staff report was prepared, the testimony received at this hearing. I further move to adopt the reasoned statement as discussed in deliberation at this hearing, in the analysis set forth in the staff report, or as amended during this hearing, and direct planning staff to draft the reasoned statement to reflect this motion as set forth in Idaho Code, Section 67-6535, have the chair sign and transmit to all interested parties. This action does not result in a taking of private property. The action that could be taken, if any, to obtain the conditional use permit is to file an application with the planning department and meet the standards required by Bonner County Revised Code, or pursue such remedies as may be applicable at Title 67, Chapter 65, Idaho Code.
Bill, are you still online?
Yes, I am.
Are we okay with?
Yeah, that sounds fine. There is a federal remedy here, but it's not necessary that you identify it in the motion that they could appeal. So yeah, that's the motion that I worked on with staff. I compliment the board on a thorough analysis.
Okay, thanks. I'll second that motion.
Any deliberation amongst the board?
I feel the board thoroughly reviewed the CUP.
I do as well, and I appreciate this new system. Thank you to our planning department and our legal department for coming up with this so that we can make a better, educated, precise determination.
Completely agree. Any further deliberation?
I have none.
With that, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Donkey?
Yes.
Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
Commissioner Horn?
Yes.
Motion passes. It is 11:26, and this public hearing is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.